Hi, Heather here from Creative Kiwi. Thanks for watching this video on it's actually just one of the blocks in our Sewing is Therapy wall hanging. As I say, I don't show the complete how to make the complete quilt in this video, just what we're calling the very plain name of block 7, because it has a few added extras that I thought it might be easier to show in a video rather than just in our step-by-step instructions. Included in the download file is our written instructions, which does show in detail full photo details of each block. So if you're completely new to the design, you certainly can make it from the written instructions. But in this video, we just showed the one block called block 7. Follows the same techniques for all in the hoop blocks though, so yeah, you can watch this and it will give you an idea of how each block is made. So they all start out the same way, and that's basically by hooping your stabilizer. Now I use like a no-show easy mesh cutaway, and I use this pinning method, which is helpful to stop any movement within your hoop, which we all know is really important with embroidery. So the first step with them all is this placement line. Now this is the actual outside or finished sides of the block. So we stitch that onto the stabilizer, and it just gives us a guide for putting on the fabrics. Now the next step is to add your batting. I use a fusible fleece, and you can see I've got quite a large piece there. I guess it's just trying to show how you can actually save on wastage with your batting. I could have actually done a better job because there is actually a wee bit of wastage around the edges here. But you can see I've just got a long piece, and I'm just going to attach it, and then I'm just going to cut away really close to that edge, so it does save a little bit. And as I say, I could have done better actually, because there is a little bit extra on all sides, but you can see there, so you're actually saving on that whole side bit. But anyway, so we're trimming away the batting from the block. Now this just helps with the bulk and the seams, and it just saves you having to do this later, so it's easier to do it now. So now what we're going to do is actually add our main fabric, which ends up being the frame fabric. And you should always cut your blocks, I like to say 2 inches larger than your finished size. So here I'm doing the 8x8 size in this sample. So I've cut my fabric pieces 10 by 10, and that just gives you a bit of wriggle room to make sure, if you don't centre it quite properly, and it gives you enough room for your seam allowances. Because for in the hoop blocks, the excess is your seam allowance, which you cut back later. So you can see there, you've just attached the fabric, and again, it's just followed that block outline, and now it's just going to stitch the inner frame guideline. Let's say all the blocks follow the same method. Now the next step's optional. It just depends. I'm cutting away the centerpiece. Now if you're worried about bulk on your machine, you certainly could do this, or if you're worried about a dark colour showing through. If you've got like a white fabric and you're not worried about bulk, you could just start placing your applique fabrics on top of this and just omit this step. But anyway, as I say, you can cut away the centre. I was just worried about the little pink flower bits showing through on the plain material, so I've cut it away. And you've got a little square bit of fabric there that you can use next time for something else. Now this goes with the written instructions, but for this particular one we're putting a background fabric, which I think when you see the instructions, this is my desk fabric. So I'm just taping that in place over that inner guideline, and now we're going to stitch that piece of fabric down, but it also does attach the guidelines for your other pieces of fabric. And with applique, you're just adding more and more pieces of fabric and cutting away the excess as you go. So there you go, you can see we've got the outline of the different pieces there. Now again, if this was quite dark, you could cut away that little piece there. I'm not. This is my curtain fabric, so this is the wallpaper fabric. This is the background on my blocks. So I've just used red and white fabric, but I've used the wrong side, so it wasn't quite as bright. So anyway, we're attaching the next piece of fabric, which happens to be the wallpaper. And so this is in detail in your photo, in your step-by-step photo instructions. So we're just going to cut away the excess fabric from the wallpaper fabric. Okay, so now we're on to the next piece of fabric, which is the top of the pin cushion. Now this is why I've done the video here, because we're adding some puff to the top of the pin cushion. You don't need to do this, and in the instructions I give the two files, one for this with the added extras and one just plain. And obviously if that was just the plain block, the actual piece would just stitch right round and you could cut away the excess. But what I'm showing here is we're just going to add a little bit of padding here. And in hindsight, I actually added a wee bit too much, but we'll go talk about that as we go through. So I've just got a little bit of K-pop filling, stuffing. You could use anything. And you're just going to put that in there, in that gap. Now you can see there is a stitch line there, so that's where the machine's going to stitch next. So as long as you've got your batting or your stuffing away from that edge. Now I should have just stayed with the one lot because I think that's actually a little bit puffy, but anyway, I didn't. Now I'm just using a pencil there to add it in, and that is the stitch line where the machine's going to stitch next. And so this is optional, you don't need to do this. I'm just using that pencil just to hold it down and save my fingers. Okay, so let's just close that gap. And what I'm going to show here is just have a quick look and make sure you're happy that, you know, everything's all stitched down there fine. And so I think I used just a little bit too much stuffing in that one. But once you're happy anyway, you just stitch the next colour, which just re-stitches that edge, just to give you a nice cutting line. Now, just as we would do normally, you're just going to cut away the excess fabric from around that piece of the design piece. I just thought this was a cute little feature that you could put pins in. My wall hanging's hanging on my sewing room wall, and I know that's where my needles and thread will be. Actually, I'll stick them in there. Now, so if you're just doing a plain piece of fabric there, you would just do that and attach it. We're going to put vinyl on, so that's done later in the piece. So let's just say there's two different files, so we'll get to that next. The next one we're going to do is the other pin cushion. And it's just going to follow a very similar idea. So it's going to stitch around basically 3/4 of the area, and it's going to stop with that little gap there. Now I think I did better with this one. I only put not quite so much stuffing in. Just enough to give it some detail on the, you know, wall hanging. Yeah, you can see it's not quite so puffy. But the same idea, it's just going to stitch down that left side. So just make sure that the stuffing is out of that area. That stitches it closed. Make sure you're happy with it. And now it's just going to stitch around again, just to give you that nice cutting edge. Whoops, I think I've skipped a step. So, but basically it's just exactly as before. You're just going to cut away all the excess fabrics. And so this is with all the blocks, same steps. Then we have a zigzag step. So normally I've used white cotton in all this, but it's just going to go around and zigzag all the raw edges so you don't have any registration problems, because everything's all neatly tied down or stitched down. Okay. Now I haven't gone through every single colour, but basically now it's just embroidering as per the instructions, the different colours there. Now what I'm doing here for the vinyl piece, I'm just showing that you get to the step where you have satin stitched everything, and it's just going to do a satin stitch around the edge of the jar. And why I've split this is, depending on what vinyl we use, sometimes the satin stitch can actually split the vinyl. So what we've done is we've added a step here so that we're going to attach the vinyl, but we're just going to use the decorative stitch, so it won't perforate the vinyl that much that the vinyl will cut away. You can see there I'm just taping it in place outside of the stitch line, which is the jar edge. And pretty much like we did before, it's just going to do that a decorative stitch around, but just 3/4 of the jar. And now we can just add things to the jar. So I've just added some buttons, but you could do some funny things here. You could add threads. That would be quite cool. Some of the odd offcuts of threads that we've you can put that in there. It's going to stitch along that top edge, so as long as you have all your buttons or whatever you put in there away from that top edge. And there we go, we're just going to do the final zigzag, and that's encased everything within that vinyl. And yeah, pretty explanatory. You're just going to cut away close to that vinyl edge, and that's your block finished. And as you can see there, the sample is the in the hoop block, so it's got everything. It's got the design plus the outside quilting. So I just thought, if you are new to in the hoop blocks, I'm just showing sort of the next few steps that you take. And I guess the first thing is just to cut away that excess stabiliser. You've got guidelines on the back there, and again that's just to reduce bulk in the seams. I'm showing a different block there. But the beauty of in the hoop blocks is you have that outside edge, so you can use that as a cutting guide to square up your block. And you can add body bit seam allowance on. I think I've got 1/2 inch I just add. So as long as you use the same seam allowance throughout all the blocks, you're going to end up with the whole 9 blocks looking exactly the same size. So that's it. If you're experienced within the hoop blocks, go off and make your wall hanging. Now if you're completely new, I have just shown here, or continued on with how to easily stitch together in the hoop blocks. They are so cool because everything's there, you've got outlines already. So what I'm showing there is you start off first thing to make sure you've got your blocks up the right way. Now as you can see there, where you've cut away the stabiliser, you've actually got the 2 lines there. So what I'm doing is I'm just matching up and pinning, and it's to those lines, or to the stitch lines that are already there. So I'm just right in the corner there, and I'm just matching up to the corner of the second block and just pinning. Now they should, pretty much match. I mean, that's the beauty of in the hoop block. See, they're all the same size. So again, you're just adding some pins there, and it's just using that line as a guide, because when you go to sew these blocks, you've got a line to guide you. As long as you sew just to the inside of that line, I'm trying to show that there, just a tiny wee bit inside that stitch line, there'll be nothing showing on the front. You'll just have a complete block you won't see any of the other sewing that we've got there. So you can see I'm just slowly stitching those together. As I say, from experience, the main thing is to make sure that you are stitching both blocks up the right way. I have definitely done that before, stitched them wrong sides together or wrong way together. I think if we open that up, you can see it's just along that inside. And there you go, perfect matching. And so that is the beauty of in the hoop blocks. They're all the same size. Now obviously you're just going to do the same on the other side. Right, so in the end you end up with the 3 rows, and I just thought I'd show here an easy way of getting perfect matching points again. So with your 3 rows, you iron the seam allowances in the opposite directions. So you can see there we've got one row with the seam going to the left and one row with the seam going to the right. And what you can do there, same idea, you're just pinning right in the center where you've already got your guidelines, but the seams are going opposing ways, so they just kind of fit together. And see, so you haven't got all the bulk on one side, but it also, as I say, they just, I guess it's physics, it's just the way it just fits together nicely. So if you match up your centers first, you see what we're doing? Side seam going one way, other seam going the other, and using your stitch lines as a guide. So if you do the center first, you can see pretty much match. And you can use more pins, you know, I just do the one in the center, but if you need more, certainly use more. So you do that, and then you do again on the other side. So exactly what we did before, going to match those corners right on the edge together. And this is going to give you perfect joins in the center. Now, I think the video gets a bit faster here, but it's just you're doing exactly the same on the other side. Now, there's always one thing before you sew, just check you've got it going the right way. And then it's off to the machine, and so because you've got the guideline on your, it's basically the back of the stabilizer, you just stitch just slightly to the left of that, and it'll be perfect. And there we go. Perfect joins every time. Now that's where I'm going to finish this video. Rather than show you step by step how to make the physical quilt, Kay has done some fantastic videos on different ways of finishing quilts. We've got one, and the links are below, that shows how to do add sashing and binding to your quilts, or you could just do what we call a paper bag finish, where you just put a backing on the back, no binding required. So thanks so much for watching. I do hope that, particularly if you're a newbie, I hope you've learned something from the videos. And make sure you join our Creative Kiwi group and share the photos of the designs you make. Thanks so much. Bye.